Khattab enters into Jerusalem on a donkey's back. No, he didn't. At the time of entering into Jerusalem, it is the aid, Sayyidina Umar's aid that was working. It was his turn to ride. And the aid says, but we entering Jerusalem, you entering as a conqueror, you entering as a man that is going to set free the inhabitants of Jerusalem from persecution, from violation, from all of these, the evil that had been perpetuated against them. And Sayyidina Umar says, no, it is your turn to ride. It is your turn to ride. And we must be just. We must be fair. So Sayyidina Umar ibn al-Khattab, he insists that his aid rides and they enter into Jerusalem. The companions then inform Sayyidina Umar that they are going to meet with the patriarch. And then the patriarch meets with Sayyidina Umar and takes him for a journey through the city of Jerusalem. And then they get to the church. And this would be the main church in Jerusalem. Remember, at this time, for the 500 years prior to Sayyidina Umar setting free Palestine, Jews were not allowed to live in Jerusalem under Christian law. Who changes that? Our Amir, Umar ibn al-Khattab, allows for the Jews to return to Jerusalem. And what happens? The patriarch gets to this main church of Jerusalem and he insists it is Salah time. He insists that you must pray the prayer in the church. Look at the wisdom of Sayyidina Umar. He says, no, I cannot pray in your church, for I fear that the Ummah of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam years from now, they will come to Jerusalem. They will come to this holy land and they will say, our Amir made Salah in this church. This is now ours. What does Sayyidina Umar do? Sayyidina Umar ibn al-Khattab performs the Salah outside on the steps of the church to protect. And Sayyidina Umar understood this was a man who was muhaddath. Rasulullah says every ummah, every nabi, he has a person in his ummah who's muhaddath. He has some or other inspiration. He has foresight, he has vision. Sayyidina Umar knew that you might just find certain individuals that on account of him having prayed in the church, they will deem it their right to have that church. Look at today. Look at the conduct of people today in relation to our Muslims. And this is not an isolated incident. Look at Sultan Salahuddin al-Ayyubi. The exact same demeanor that he would spend of his own wealth. And European historians, mind you, European historians would they would mention when the Crusaders conquered Palestine, they murdered everyone. Not just the combatants, because we understand that Sharia has a certain, and we're not going to go into the topic of jihad, we're going to keep it light because we're speaking about persistence as well. That is the jihad there tonight, inshallah. But when hey, jihad al-nafs. But there are certain guidelines that the Sharia has given us in relation to jihad as well. And the Sultan, Salahuddin al-Ayyubi, when he conquers Masjid al-Aqsa, if I remember correctly, it was on Friday when he came, and he uses his own wealth to set free all of the people that wishes to leave Jerusalem. He pays their ransom. Subhanallah. If we look at the conduct today, if we look at how the treatment of the Palestinian people is today, it is a far cry from our leaders. It is a far cry from the people that it is to be found in our ummah, that led this ummah. And it is good to see young men like Abdullah Ghifar, like Muna Qurbi, like Mahmoud Qurbi, and so many other young Muslims in Palestine standing up for justice. So at the time when Sayyidina Umar ibn al-Khattab, and this can be a short discussion, inshallah. It's not a Jum'ah bayan, inshallah. time when Sayyidina Umar, radiallahu anhu, receives the keys to Jerusalem, a treaty is drawn up, a covenant is drawn up, an agreement is drawn up between the Muslims and the new conquered land. And in there, subhanAllah, firstly, Sayyidina Umar highlights every person in Jerusalem will be safe. Every person in this land will be safe. His property will be safe. The churches and the places of worship that is non-Muslim places of worship will not be destroyed. The crosses of the church will be intact. The land that is owned by the people will be owned by them. Those people that wish to leave, they will be escorted to the closest land of the Byzantians. All of these criteria is placing. Imam al-Tabari, for example, discusses this in his Tariq al-Tabari. Al-Waqidi, the historian, he discusses all of these criteria of Sayyidina Umar that he had placed down in this treaty. If we compare the honor to be found in the treaty of Sayyidina Umar versus, unfortunately, the dishonor and the disarray and this grotesque manner in which the Israeli apartheid state is treating Palestinians today, Umar never took land. You pay the jizya, no problem. You pay the tax that protects you, we will keep you safe. Today, our mothers and our fathers, our brothers and our sisters are being kicked off their land. A lot like what happened in apartheid South Africa. So, your thought, brothers, I've spoken a lot now. So I'll hand over to our friends, inshallah, to highlight certain aspects of the history of Palestine.
Barakallah, brother. There are actually many points that if I would follow up on what you just mentioned, for example, when you mentioned like Ma'arakat al-Yarmouk, the Yarmouk battle, you know, the largest refugee camp, Palestinian refugee camp, is called al-Yarmouk refugee camp. And in that particular camp, there are Israeli soldiers who tried to go and, you know, they were fighting against Palestinians, but they are buried there. You know, and there is lots of symbolism in that, but I don't go into more details. And there are many aspects, as you were speaking, that I was also remembering about Jerusalem.
You should just jump in.
And as a matter of fact, like for example, like the church that you mentioned, Sayyidina Umar bin Khattab, he prayed outside the church, and then the Muslims they built a mosque next to the church. So the Muslims and the Christians, they show like the spirit of coexistence and living together, and it's been since the time of Sayyidina Umar bin Khattab up until now. They pray next to each other and without anyone, you know, bothering the other because of the respect they have. Then even at that time, the family that was looking after the church then remained the key that was given to them up until now. That Palestinian family keeps giving that key for the next generation. And at some point in history, the family converted to Islam, but the family still opens the church to the Christian worshippers every single day. Right? And that church has never been closed.
We open the churches and
has never been closed. No, the Christians there, they don't close up the church. Oh, in Palestine, it's this was my point now, is that it has been open through since the time of Sayyidina Umar bin Khattab. The only time it was closed now when the Israelis occupy Palestine. And the time of Salahuddin al-Ayyubi, also when Salahuddin conquered, when he opened Jerusalem. As a matter of fact, when they speak about the massacres that happened there, they say that in Masjid al-Aqsa, the compound itself, the Crusaders, then they killed everybody actually who was in the mosque, right? Because people took refuge in the mosque. And they say that the blood level in that place went up to the knees because of how many people were killed in that battle. Right? And the smell was remained there for years after the crusade actually went to Jerusalem, unfortunately. And maybe if we follow up on that also, when Salahuddin Ayyubi, he told the Crusades, you can leave now. And many of them left, and they went, and many of these prisoners who were captured by the Muslims, they went home, and some of them, they regrouped in what is now Akka, which is also still in the north of Palestine, they regrouped and they attacked again, but they were defeated again by Salahuddin Ayyubi. So there are a lot of aspects if we go to history, but I might like actually to bring it closer, if you allow me, and maybe not too close, but to about like just over 100 years, and that is to 1897. And that is a very significant date, I would say, for the history of the Palestinian struggle. And there's lots of lessons to be taken there. The reason for that is because on that date, it was the first ever Zionist conference in the world. There was a journalist. I don't want to mention his name because I don't like their names. You know, I do know the name by the way, but I just don't want to mention the name. It's because I don't want them to be remembered in history. That's the only reason. Who? like yes, there are many.
We don't even know his father.
Yes, which is good. So it's, you know what? I think the narrative, we need to control the narrative. It's part of the struggle to control your own narrative. So for that reason, I don't like saying their names. Yeah. You know, even when we refer to Palestine, you know, many people when they speak, they say they refer to the Palestinian lands that were occupied in 1948. They refer to that as Israel. We know that the international community refers to it as Israel, but for me, it is still the 1948 occupied Palestinian territory. It is still Palestine, even if it's now everybody in the world says it's Israel. I will continue saying it's Palestine, no matter what happens. So going back to the 1897, it was the first ever Zionist meeting, and in that meeting, a group of Zionists they came together, and then they said, in 50 years we will have a state. When was Palestine completely occupied, and then the state of Israel was then given legitimacy? 50 years later, 1948. In 1947, they were already busy killing Palestinians in the streets and massacring thousands of Palestinians. So the lesson in that is that, as they say, that there are many. I was once sitting with the Sheikh. He said we can take lessons sometimes even from the Shaitan, in his persistence, you know, to make us disobey Allah. But the Shaitan never gets, you know, tired of trying to make us, you know, sin and whatever. So if we take that just one lesson, you know, one lesson where we can also persist and continue to try our best to be better. So what the Zionists did, and this is a good example actually, the Zionists and the Shaitan. Now they then work so hard to actually then create their vision. And this is a lesson for us as Muslims. I would say that we need to have a vision, a collective one, not just, you know. It's good that everyone should have a personal vision for how he or she wants the future to look like, but that vision should be part of a greater vision for the entire Ummah, right? Somebody wants to be an accountant, they can be great accountants, and then they must lead, you know, in their field to somehow benefit the Muslim Ummah. When we have a Muslim, you know, state ruled by justice and, you know, all the Muslim ethos that are based on respect, and, you know, so we need also people who have these skills at the end of the day. So the niyyah and the intention should be from the beginning that my vision is aligned with the greater vision. Inshallah. So that happened in 1897, and they worked extremely hard, lobbying different countries, to the extent that they actually collaborated with some anti-Semitic states, like the UK, France, and others who now they lecture us about anti-Semitism, but they themselves are the most, like Israel. I would argue and say that Israel is the most anti-Semitic state in the world. And I will explain.
Just the point there. They didn't want the Jews in Europe.
That's exactly why they wanted to create Israel.
Exactly. So
that's exactly why Israel was created.
Yeah, subhanAllah. So they wanted, what are we going to do with this people? Let's look at a map, and this was the British mandate. Let's look at a map, and we find, and what better place than, let's put them right there by the Palestinians. SubhanAllah, a point to note, an important point to note, the Palestinian people that were living in Palestine, the Muslims, they opened the door and said, come and live here. You have no place to go, come and live here. Look at the detrimental state that we find ourselves in today, that after opening the door, these people, they occupy the entire home.
It's like you're giving somebody like a guest, you give them like maybe a guest room and then they take over the entire house. They give you only maybe the bathroom, they tell you, you can't stay there. And that's basically what the two-state solution is, or if anyone was interested. Because today I was asked, what's wrong with the two-state solution? I said, but everything is wrong with the two-state solution. It shouldn't be called even the two-state solution, it should be called the two-state problem, you know, to the Palestinian cause. But anyways, maybe I should just to keep in track with the history, and maybe I wouldn't take too long explaining that far. So in 1948, what happened is that, say if we look at Jerusalem, for example, and maybe we link it with the treatment of first Umar bin Khattab and then Salah ad-Din Ayyubi, when the Zionists came to a village called Deir Yassin in 1947, actually. And they massacred everyone in that small village. Literally everyone. Why? Because it was a terrorist tactic to strike fear in the Palestinians who were living in the neighboring villages and in Jerusalem as well. Right? So everyone can run away. And that is terrorism. That's the definition of terrorism, is that you strike fear into people's hearts so they can run away, or when you kill them with the intention to do that, right? With the intention of just killing them. So they came, the stories that we hear from the children that then were supposed that they were left just to tell other people. They left only a few ones to be like messengers, to say that, to warn the other villages so people can run away. They said that they will come to a pregnant woman and they will actually hit her with a knife, take a baby out, as is she alive, and then will kill her. They rounded all the men and they shot all of them. That's just one example about one village. And they did that. There are over 500 Palestinian towns and villages that were either destroyed or expelled in 1948, and in the process, the before and after. Right? SubhanAllah, but the world now, the media doesn't even speak about that. Is ethnic cleansing. That is a slow genocide, actually. What Israel is doing today is a slow genocide. So if we jump, and again, I just wanted to highlight that the lesson that we should do, that we should take, that the 50 years, that they put a vision, they worked for it, they worked out, although they used their own means, but they worked for it and they achieved what they wanted to achieve. Right? And then if we jump about 40 years later, and I would say then, since the occupation of Palestine, or the colonization rather of Palestine in 1948, that generation was the most skilled generation, I would say. But then, and speaking about generations, it takes like about 40 years to renew another generation. So count 40 years after 1948, okay, 1988, and that was the first Intifada. So the first generation, when then the second generation came, then the Palestinians, they had their first uprising, right? And I would say now we are close to the second, the second generation being, almost ending, and the third generation is coming. And I'm proud to say that I'm of the third generation. Inshallah, that will be the third generation that will liberate Palestine. So after, defeating the fear that was in our hearts, they're making the circle to wake up, and now is to, instead of being reactive, not to be proactive. Inshallah. And then we will be our generation. I don't want to wait. People say in our children's lifetime or our grandchildren. No, I want it in my lifetime. I don't want to wait until my grandchildren only be free. I want to see freedom as well. And I am a bit greedy in that regard. I do have a vision and I have a dream, not the dream that Martin Luther King had. I have a better one, which is to free Palestine, inshallah. And we don't give up. The Palestinians are very hard. Are you jumping in?
Let's go.
Okay, now that he's had his coffee, you can jump in.
So I like what some Palestinian leaders over the years, of this last century have said, for example, that we're not fighting the Jews because they are Jews. Since we are fighting them because they came and occupied our land.
You remember who was that? You remember who was that?
I read it in a book about Hamas movement. It's
I-
written by Sheikh Ahmed
You
Yassin.
should see, it's actually in video.
Wow.
He said that in an interview.
Yes. So it says we fight them because they came and occupied our lands and killed our people and took over our homes. He said if it was my own Arab family of or people that were to do this, we would have fought them also. So it's not we're not fighting them because they are Jews, but we are fighting them on the basis of justice, like you're saying, right? Because they came to occupy our land and take over our homes. And even South Africans in the struggle, that's exactly what they used to say about that. They used to say freedom in our lifetime, freedom or death. But so it's definitely it's all happening in all of our lifetimes. It's going to happen. We can feel it. The 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 oppression of the Zionist movement not only makes life difficult for Palestinians, but uh, that oppression, that corruption, actually touches us right here in South Africa. If we look at, for example, just look at one industry. Look at the entertainment industry. Right? Yeah, when we grew up, the movies that we used to watch, and at the end, you get all the list of producer and director and all this, and you look at the names, and it's and it's them. So they have been spreading the corruption all across the world, and like it was referenced earlier, it's not that Muslims have a specific enmity or score to settle with anyone or Jews or Zionists. In fact, others, the Christian Europe, treated them much worse by kicking them out of Europe more than once. Muslims, even until 1948, Jews lived in the Arab world, and even until today, in some Arab countries, Jews are living peacefully and still have the homes that they have since before 1948.
Do you mind, actually, just on the point that you said earlier about how the Zionist movement, the effect even South Africans here, I would say that first, the words of Nelson Mandela, where he said that our freedom is incomplete without the freedom of the Palestinians. It's because, Verwoerd, actually, since the beginning of apartheid, he said that he said that why is the world only speaking about us, why not speak about Israel? Imagine, because he thought that was a positive thing to say, about the apartheid compared with Israel, which is a really good point. And many times they would connect and they would exchange, experiences. And we find that I saw once a picture about for Ariel Sharon actually, where he was with the troops, the South African troops in Angola, and also where they were fighting against the MK fighters. There was just 2 days ago, I was with a friend, and she told me that she was reading a book that was written by a South African white man who was fighting at that time with the apartheid regime in Angola in particular. And he said in his book there that there was Israeli soldiers with them on the ground. At the same time, if you ask some of the South Africans that I did meet some of them. I don't want to mention names because I didn't take the permission. But many of them, they say that in the camps when they were training with, to fight against apartheid, there was Palestinians as well from the PLO were fighting. So the struggle is basically, and they were both fighting against apartheid and Israel in Africa. And in a way, if you look at that, then the soil of Africa, has Palestinian and South African blood mixed together in the soil of Africa. So that's just like on the point where you say that.
Exactly. Both of it, right here as we see it, as we see it now. In fact, I read a book a while ago called Gideon's Spies, and it recounts a certain period of history of the Mossad movement or of the Mossad organization, which is secret service, you know, agency of the you know, illegal Israeli regime. And South Africa, you know, comes up frequently, many times in that book, because of the close relationship and collaboration between the apartheid, the illegal state of Israel, and apartheid South Africa. But the South African forces many times did operations and killed and assassinated on behalf of the Zionists in Africa. Some of their enemies, they had shared enemies or common enemies here, and they worked together. You know, there's so many things that could be said on that front. For example, even when South Africa was finally liberated in the apartheid system, one of the programs that was shut down in South Africa is the biological warfare program. South Africa had a biological warfare, you know, program that was being developed here. Where did most of those scientists that was working in the biological warfare programs of Africa go to after 1994 when it was, you know, dismantled here? Take a guess. Yeah, they went to the apartheid illegal state of Israel because they still, until today, have a biological warfare program. So it's okay, I mean, illegal under the most progressive laws anywhere in the world.
Many of them couldn't even bear the fact that they can now live equally to non-whites in South Africa. So they couldn't even take that and live here in South Africa. So they looked at the second, in a way, closest option they had to what they were used to, being privileged in South Africa. And there's no better place than Israel, obviously. So many of them went to Israel. And I had many activists here, South Africans, they tell me many times they go to, you know, when they in Palestine and they are at the border or at the airport, then they hear some soldiers speaking Afrikaans, you know, because many of them come from here. And there's, up until now, actually, in the war in Gaza in 2014, there was about 72 South Africans were fighting there with the city.
This is something that the South African government and Palestinian lobby organizations and activist organizations need to take up. And they have been taking it up, but because the laws, because these, I mean, even the Zionists, even in South Africa, are moving, you know, in all the right circles, even influencing since '94, they have influenced our constitution, they have influenced so many policies to protect, you know, to protect what they do, not only in the apartheid of Israel, but even in South Africa.
Can I have a question? Can I ask a question to the two of you? What do you think is the impact of Zionism in the Muslim community in South Africa?
I'm just going to sister while you answers.
Take your time.
What is the impact of Zionists on South Africans?
On South African Muslims, in your, I would say, in the, you know, on the community, in the, you know, the way that the community runs. Do you think that there is any influence from the Zionists?
Well, I think the fact that Al-Shad has indicated something as simple as the entertainment industry, right? Zionism has managed to systematically and very stealthily worm itself in everything, right? You mentioned the two-state resolution, right? 1948, a day before the British mandates to come to an end, the state of Israel claimed its independence, and this would lead to the inevitable Nakba. So we have within our own country, South Africa, two particular political parties that are both speaking about a two-state resolution for Palestine. The impact of which would be extremely valuable for the Palestinian people. So the fact that we have our politicians that are playing the political game here does have an impact. How far that impact might be will be determined probably by the individual Muslim living in Cape Town or in South Africa and having to consciously make a decision for himself. And what I mean by that is, when it comes time to our voting for our political leaders, we need to make sure that we choose political leaders that will have the interests of the South African people, the Muslim South Africans, number one, at heart. And number two, more importantly, their foreign policies. So, for example, I would feel, apologies, I would feel that one of the things that our current governing party, the ANC, needs to look at would be things like free visas for Palestinian people. That they should not need a visa, but rather when you come here, you will be issued. Because, I mean, Nelson Mandela speaks about this. And the fact that our Palestinians, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, you still need to apply for a visa. And there's no diplomatic relations where Palestinians can just come here. They need to apply and they need to go through a whole process in order to get to South Africa. I feel that is an indictment on our freedom that we have here in South Africa, that the very same Palestinians that Mandela spoke about still needs to apply for a visa. So the effect of Zionism is
Compare that, by the way, with the Israelis. I'm sorry to cut you off.
they can come here without a visa
for 90 days. So that for 3 months, they can come as tourists, do whatever they want. And they don't just come for tourism, they come for other reasons as well.
Yeah.
And whereas we Palestinians need to apply for visa.
Yeah.
And it's a hard process.
Yeah. So to basically wrap up my entire point, Zionism is everywhere. It affects everything, whether it be our own municipality here, whether it be across the world. They have some other impact. The problem is we cannot see because we don't understand it, because we don't know how, let's call it the judicial system works.
Do you mind if I can
jump?
jump?
I'll have my sister now. Okay, I won't have it.
You know that it was a conscious decision that, I could have, this evening, made that coffee have a Zionist taste in it.
Like Jacob's.
Hmm?
Jacob's Groningen coffee.
The milk that, I made a conscious decision not to get clover milk for this coffee. This is clover milk for this coffee. Our Clover, South African Clover dairy company, was recently purchased or bought by the main, but it is the AV company, I think it's called Milka, and they have the controlling share in Clover now. So when you buy a Clover product, whether it's cheese or milk, you are supporting Zionism. When you go to Cape Union Mart, it's now we are how many days are we from Labaran?
So possibly on Wednesday next week, tonight is Wednesday, possibly next week, Wednesday next week will be the takbir, the end of Ramadan. Oh, the Muslims are all going to go to Cape.
Everyone's going to go to Waterfront,
Cape Union Mart, yeah.
And going to Cape Union Mart because we're going into winter now. Everyone's looking for the new jacket.
Yeah.
Everyone's looking for the thermal and the soft shell and what else.
Yeah.
But they're going to, so I made a conscious decision myself not to buy anything for the last few years since I found out that they get special awards from the Israeli apartheid state and the regime for their support.
What's his name? Kravitz. I think his name is Kravitz.
Kravitz, the K-way. And
yeah, K-way
you
Kravitz.
wear that, and it says K-way Kravitz, Kravitz way. So
isn't there a highway named after him? I think they both like an N1, like like we have the N1 and the N2.
I don't know how
I've heard that. Subhanallah, I need to mention actually. I teach madrasa for kids, and one day we spoke about this guy that owns Chelsea. What's his name? Abramovich. And then I mentioned that Abramovich had sponsored X amount of millions for a settlement in Jerusalem. And then one of the boys said, "What does that mean, Sheikh?" So I explained and I said that imagine for a moment you're sleeping at night and then soldiers break down your door. They take your daddy and your grandpa and your big brother and they take them away and you have no idea where they are. And your mom and your sisters and yourself, because you're still young, get put outside on the pavement and they bulldoze your house to the ground. So your mom phones whoever to go and find your dad, and you guys all leave. And then tomorrow when you come back, and your dad is released from whatever prison he was in for whatever reason, comes back to his house, there's nothing. The entire land has been bulldozed to the ground. I read an article a few years ago that spoke about one olive farm that was 300 years old. Palestinians had been living on this farm for 300 years. Something like 6, 7 generations had gone by of Palestinians living there, and it was bulldozed to the ground. Abramovich, for example, financed that family being displaced. So, and that is how settlement comes about, am I right?
And this goes to also like to keep in mind. So every rand, the owner of keep in mind actually received a special award.
I remember that.
From Benjamin Netanyahu, from the Prime Minister of Israel, as the donor who collected the most money as an individual, not as an institution, for the state of Israel.
Yes,
He received an award about 3 or 4 years ago.
I remember it. I remember that.
So every rand that people contribute to his business, basically, some of that money is actually going to Palestine. It's produced as bullets, even to be shot at Palestinians.
Yeah.
And you're buying the equipment for the Palestinian, for the Israeli, military in that way.
I think something to be fair, right? Let us not get ahead of ourselves. We've established that Zionism is a joke. We've established that the state of Israel, whether it be our desalination plants that you find, our engineers going over and building those, they are everywhere. Personally, and I agree with you. Personally, I don't buy KOA anymore. Not that I can also afford it because it is not cheap. But I made a conscious decision. And to be fair, we are not going to ridicule the person that decides he still wants to buy it. Right? Our chips in our laptops that the IMA produces, the khutbas on or whatever, typing up, many of those things are made in Israel. Right? And I want to link it to what Abdullah said earlier. What is this ummah? What is this ummah's vision for 50 years from now? I feel technology is an important thing. Support Muslim countries that are producing their own technology. It is an indictment that upon this ummah that we don't have, for example, leaders in. So often the Muslim Ummah speaks about the golden era of Islam, when we were the leaders in science, and we were the leaders, the Ibn Sinas of the Ummah. How long are we going to be, having the slogan, this mantra of the golden era, create the golden era. Have a vision where 50 years from now, we have our own companies that are producing our own chips, building our own laptops, building our own KOA soft shells and all of those things, having our own coffee instead of Jacob's Kroning or milk or whatever. Every single sphere needs to have Muslims at the apex of it. And it is not to dominate, but rather it is to be in service of. And wherever you found Muslims, you mentioned earlier when he came to sit down, he's the Ibn Battuta between the three of us, having traveled so look at the difference between Ibn Battuta having gone to discover and travel across the world versus, for example, Christopher Columbus. Or let's take Cape Town, for example, Vasco da Gama. When they came here, right, they came as colonialists. When he traveled from the east to the west, he took what? Gifts. They brought gifts and it was shackles, for example. So let us be fair in the Muslim that still wants to buy whatever he wants to buy. That is on your conscience.
Can I share with you
but before, let me just finish the Abramovich thing.
Yeah.
So I tell this boy this, right? And I knew he was a Chelsea fan, right? And it was last year during lockdown, so we teach him online, subhanAllah. I'll mention his name. Omar. His name is Omar. Omar, if you're watching, mashallah.
I told him to watch this afternoon.
Oh, you told him to watch. So Omar says, is that what the Abramovich does? So I'm like, well, his money could be used for that. That is how a settlement comes about in apartheid Israel. And Omar, he leaves, so we're on online. So he leaves, and
He's not on the screen. And then he comes back. So he had a personalized Chelsea jersey with his name on the back, Omar. And viewers, if you can just imagine, this boy is 12 years old, 11, 12 years old. And I see him with a huge scissors in hand, and I'm thinking, Ya Allah, what's going to happen? I was so scared because I don't know what's happening next. And what happens next is Omar lifts up his jersey, his Chelsea jersey, shows me his name at the back, Omar, turns it around, shows me the Chelsea badge on the front, and he proceeds to start stabbing this jersey, cutting this jersey with this huge scissors, tearing it. And we all just remained silent, online, and Omar just went at it. And when he was done, he said, Subhanallah, may Allah reward this boy for what he did. And may, if not him, the Omar, may they come and Omar. As how there was Omars before. We pray and make dua that more Omars like this will come. He says, how can I support a teacher that does this to my mommy, to my daddy, to my brother, to my sister? Because the mommy in Palestine is my mom, and the dad in Palestine is my dad. And the brother, the boy and the girl that is with is my brother and my sister. You know, it was such a moment of pride for me personally that the Ummah is in good state. Even though things are so bad in Palestine, the fact that an 11, 12-year-old boy could connect the dots, right, and realize that I don't want to be a part of this. I don't want to be a contributing factor to this. And it was a moment of such pride and gratitude to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that, Ya Allah, this ummah is going to move forward, inshallah. And the lives of Umar is going to be good for the Palestinian people. So yeah, that was the Abramovich story. And
moving moment.
yeah, and we need to emphasize the fact that he acted on his conscience. He made a conscious decision for himself that come the day of Qiyamah, I can say, I tore up a t-shirt. Again, when is this ummah going to rise and produce their own products? You know, advance themselves. And more we see with COVID-19 here in our own country, so many Muslim professionals, epidemiologists, vaccinologists, they are Muslim and they are leading us and our country in what is the best way to deal with what we are dealing with. It shouldn't just be medicine. It should be every sphere, especially technology, because that's the way the world is going. So yeah, that was the Omar story and the Abramovich story. And again, we act in our conscience. For the person that decides to, that is your decision. For the person that decides to abstain, Alhamdulillah, that is your
Everyone's on a journey, Sheikh.
Exactly.
Everyone's on a
We will just arrive in different times.
Everyone's at a different point in their own journey.
Correct.
You know, and, I a few months ago, there were some guests, in fact, some youngsters from up north, and someone asked me to help them with something, to hire a car in Cape Town. Anyways, I think something, I'll help them with that and just check up on them because they were young, like plus minus 20 years old. So just to check are they okay? Told them, we have nice places to visit in Cape Town. Check that they fine. So as they about to leave Cape Town, tell me the day before that we've got something for you. You could come down to the hotel for leave. So I said, okay. Well, I didn't expect them to give me anything. And as I go and greet them, and they put this envelope in my hand, Allah. And what do you think is in that envelope? A Cape Union Mart voucher. The shop that I haven't stopped supporting for the last few years, and now they put a Cape Union. I actually went to the Cape Union Mart, one of the stores, because also on the card you couldn't see, for example, what is it, 100 voucher or
When you went off,
500 voucher.
I went
To know what it is.
but then I did another one.
So I went to another store to go and check it out. And it was actually a substantial amount. You know, you could almost buy one, you could buy maybe one of those jackets, for example.
Okay.
Right? So I'm thinking now, must I advertise it? Must I sell this voucher? Must I give it away? I remember, for example, instances, when my and it's like you said now that Omar that's 12 years old or 11 years old, that's the generation that has decided, to change the circumstance. That's the generation that's going to take us to victory. I remember, my own little son, we had a 4x4 outing. And then just because we became accustomed also not to drink Coca-Cola products anymore, for example, to buy Coca-Cola products. So we had we with all these 4x4 guys and we're on this outing, the dunes, and there we have a braai, and they start taking out, the Coca-Cola products. And my son was probably, I think, 5 years old at that time. And now they're offering him, this Coke, and he's refusing. And to the point where he didn't drink anything because he only saw Coca-Cola products out there. And we are out enjoying ourselves. And I thought that was such a moving point for me. Because, for example, if I thought at that point, if I'm going to be offered something, they already bought it, so I might as well drink it. What's going to happen to it now, right? So I'm thinking, okay, but then that made me also think, no, I can't drink it now. Imagine my 5 years. Yeah, I have to be a good example. He's 5 years old. He said, no, I'm not going to drink it. You were saying something about the olive tree, a 300-year-old olive grove. And 2 points about these. And so, in fact, one of the earliest references in the Quran to Palestine has got to do with the olive. One of the earliest surahs revealed to the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, referencing Palestine and the Ard al-Sham and the Ard al-Muqaddasa, is in a short surah that we've all read, we've all memorized, we did it in madrasa, and that is Surah 15. Where Allah says, after A'udhu Billahi Minash Shaitanir Rajeem, وَالتِّينِ وَالزَّيْتُونِ وَطُورِ سِينِينَ وَهَذَا الْبَلَدِ الْأَمِينَ. By the fig and the olive, and by the Mount of Sinai, and by this city of safety. The first reference there, by the fig and the olive, as many of the classical and contemporary scholars indicate, that this first verse of this surah speaks about the three places where Allah Ta'ala sent of his messengers with the main messages of Tawheed. Watini was Zaytun, Palestine, that where Nabi Isa alayhi as-salam got revelation. Waturi Sinin, referencing where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala spoke to Nabi Musa alayhi salam, and also the message of Tawheed, and then Wahad al-Balad al-Amin, indicating or referencing the city of Makkah, final messenger Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam receiving the final message of Tawheed. But Allah Ta'ala drew our attention to Palestine and the sacred land in this ayah by mentioning the fig and the olive. Part of what we could learn is how fertile this land is. And then also one of the slogans of the resistance of the people on the ground today is Inna baqoon or Nahnu baqoon ma baqiya za'tar wa zaytun. We will remain here and we're staying here and we're not going anywhere as long as there is za'tar and zaytun. Maybe Allah could tell us more about the za'tar, but the za'tar spice that's used in many of the Palestinian foods. But the zaytun is that olives. Every day, I mean, if any one of us were to go to any of the Palestinian news sites or updates, you'll find Mujahid, probably every week you'll find these settlers, these militias and settlers and youths and people. They go onto the olive groves of Palestinians and they burn hundreds of olive trees, and it happens on a weekly basis. So every year, thousands of olive trees are burnt and razed to the ground. Sometimes the army actually does it. Sometimes the army does it with their bulldozers, and they bulldoze to the ground tracts of olive trees. But subhanallah, as Allah Ta'ala wants it, the olives spring out of this land as if it is part and parcel of the identity of the land. Because Allah Ta'ala says, "Watini was zaytun," as if it is part of the culture and part of the resistance. And how apt, I like that saying, "Inna baqoon ma baqiya az-za'far wa zaytun."
That's true. Speaking about that and Zaytun, you made me a bit hungry now. But I would say that you mentioned that the military, they come with their bulldozers and to wipe out basically the olives. It's because it's part of our heritage first, and second, also I want to mention how what the settlers do. It's really important to speak about when we speak about Israel. Israel is not just the military or just the government. It's actually the settlers who come from, from mostly and mainly from Europe and from the United States now. There are some other Israelis who come from other areas, but those are brought as servants. They come there just to serve, the Europeans, the Americans, because basically Israel didn't want to make the same mistake that South Africa made, where they depend in the economy was very dependent on basically the black labor here in South Africa, right? And that's why they saw that their economy wasn't sustainable. So what Israel did, they learned actually from South Africa that they wanted to expel all Palestinians and replace them with other labor. With everything is foreign there. Everything that's Israeli is foreign anyway. I don't want to say foreign labor because they're all foreign. So the point here is that the settlers who cut our trees, they are the same settlers who would attack our houses, our people when they are sleeping at night, or they are attacking the Aqsa now, or they are trying to occupy and colonize the houses like Sheikh Jarrah. Maybe we should touch on that a little bit. I'll give an example about one case that Mizan is doing, right? We said Mizan is the legal organization that I work with. There was a peaceful Palestinian family in the West Bank, but they were sleeping one night, and these settlers, they came from between the olive trees and down the mountain between the olive trees, and they attacked this one house, and they burned the house. In the house, there was a small family of a father, a mother, and two children that were sleeping in that house. The two parents, were also burned alive and they died. 18 months baby was also died in the fire, and a young boy, he was 4 years old at that time, Ahmed Dawabshan. You can Google his name and see his pictures actually. Half of his body actually was burned. His ear melted. When he wear masks now, he doesn't wear the normal mask that the surgeon mask that we wear, because he doesn't have an ear. Yes, that's how you spell his name. So Ahmed Dawaj, you can Google the name, and you can read a bit more about that story. Because what happened there is that this group of settlers, the same settlers that are now attacking this Aqsa and Jerusalem, these settlers, they attack the family and they kill this family. Ahmed still sees, nightmares about that. Up until now, he still sees nightmares about that. He suffers from lots of, mental illness, and obviously he lost his parents. His family was attacked. We try have regular attacks on families, and we wanted to what's the word, to mark them as a terrorist organization, but unfortunately Israel didn't allow that, because they are proud of these settlers. These settlers are Israel at the end of the day, but we managed to get one of them who was convicted with three murders and he got 3 life sentences. The only reason for that to happen, not because Israel wanted to give us justice, definitely not that, because there were many other massacres similar to that, but the killers went home, were free. But the only reason is because of the international solidarity. There was lots of international pressure on Israel, lots of attention that was given to this particular family. I mean, the Ahmed Dawab, there was a campaign for him to go and meet, so say for example, the Real Madrid players, and he went there actually to Spain, they hosted him, and he took pictures with Cristiano Ronaldo and others. And I'm not saying now everybody should support Real Madrid, by the way, because I am a Barcelona supporter, But so what happened is that the international pressure actually and the attention that was given to this family helped us to get one Israeli settler behind bars. Right? And this sent messages to the entire system that when the world knows about what they are doing, the international community then will step up and will hold them accountable. And this goes back now to Sheikh Jarrah, what's happening in Sheikh Jarrah now. Sheikh Jarrah is a small neighborhood in Jerusalem. And at the moment, as we speak actually, the people are protesting in their homes. Tomorrow, as a matter of fact, tomorrow's Thursday, right? Tomorrow is there is plans by Israel.
Some pictures just came through now, Abdullah. I'm seeing it on my phone now. And similar to what became famous in America with George Floyd, with this cop knee into the neck, throat. There's about five different pictures of Sheikh Jarrah neighborhood in Al-Quds, Jerusalem tonight, of them restraining Palestinians just for defending their houses.
You are referring to a picture, and I can tell you now, a young man is wearing a red t-shirt with his long hair, and his name is Omar actually, as well. That young man, Omar, he was actually he himself is not actually from Sheikh Jarrah. He's from one of the neighboring cities. He went there to stand in solidarity with the people of Sheikh Jarrah, and he was. And the Palestinians are standing together and all of that to try and support each other and protest against this. But as I was saying, that tomorrow the Israeli government is planning to remove them out of their homes. And this goes back to the people who lived in, say, District 6 or Constantia or Claremont would know the feeling of being uprooted and being, displaced from your home and kicked out of your house where you grew up, where you have all the memories about your childhood, your bedroom there, and now just tomorrow there might be a Zionist, an Israeli sleeping on their bedrooms. Instead of them being in their homes where they grew up, there would be a European who doesn't even speak Hebrew, not let alone other languages, doesn't even speak Hebrew well. They will come there and speak to you in an American accent and tell you that this is not your home, it's their home now. Can you believe that? As we speak, the Palestinians are protesting there, and I would actually ask everybody who are watching us to go on your Instagram or Facebook and follow Muna al-Kurd. Right? On Instagram, it's Muna MUNA Kurd 15, and follow that girl. It's actually her house. One of the houses that is now being under attack. Last night, actually, they arrested her brother Mahmoud. And I think her twin brother also Muhammad was beaten up. And this family is a real example about, actually, first it's about Palestinian, what a Palestinian is like, how courageous they are. When they see a group of Israeli soldiers coming, she saw them attacking her brother, beating him. She jumped in between them, and she was also fighting to free her brother. And you can look at you actually get inspired by what they are doing. And this is something that, many times when we speak about Palestine, people think that, these poor Palestinians, and they feel sorry for them. I actually would say, please don't feel sorry for us. What I want you to feel is that I want you to feel proud of us. Because Palestinians are strong, We are strong, but what we want is, we want your attention to what's happening. We want you to pay attention to what's happening. Not to feel sorry for us. We want you to feel proud of us that we are still fighting Because what we are doing, what the Palestinians are doing in Sheikh Jarrah, that's just like, a few meters from Masjid al-Aqsa. Those are the people who are protecting Masjid al-Aqsa on your behalf. And I would say that imagine if there is an army today standing outside of Mecca and Medina, trying to enter and trying to break down and go into Mecca and Medina, trying to change the masjid from masjid to something else, to a synagogue or whatever it is, trying to prevent the Muslims from entering to the masjid, the haram, either Mecca or Medina. How would you feel as a South African Muslim sitting here? Would you be happy about it? Would you just go on in your day like there's nothing happening in the news and TV? How many South Africans now open the TV every night before iftar or even when they come back from home and watch what's happening in Palestine? How connected are we? And this goes back to the point about having a vision. And I would like to say, having a vision is planning ahead, but and also planning your everyday steps should be, you can see your road, you can see that I am working. Like maybe I'll give from a personal experience. I would say that before I come to South Africa, I actually, whenever anybody tells me have a vision, I didn't know what that meant, to be honest. And I don't expect people to just wake up one day and say, yeah, I have a vision. It doesn't happen like that. But it's when you think about something every single day, then you start dreaming about it. You start, speaking every day about that. Sometimes, when I'm taking a shower, I'm thinking, what? When we free Palestine, I want to do this with that land. I want to do this. Well, I'm not joking. It's like when I'm driving around in Palestine and I see like a beautiful piece of land, I say, oh, mashallah, this beautiful piece of land will bear fruit for us, inshallah, in the future. And wallah, I'm not exaggerating. When you think about something and when it's that close to your heart, you become literally dreaming about it every moment, And that's what I want, probably from the South African youth especially. I really bank on the youth because, as I said, our generation is the one that's going to liberate Palestine. I would say that the first thing that they must work on is unity here at home. Work on unity. And when I say unity, I don't only talk politically. I speak also economically and socially. Connect with the Muslim businesses around you. And that is, again, not to dominate, as Sheikh mentioned earlier. It's not to dominate, it's but to serve. Because we as Muslims, we are supposed to serve not only other Muslims, but everyone in our communities. We are supposed to connect with everyone, right? We as Muslims should lead and be examples of how coherence and coexistence within communities happen. And I would say, look at here in South Africa. How do we connect with our neighbors, say in the townships, in the Cape Flats, in wherever we are living? How is our relation with our neighbors? And that should be part of your vision to liberate Palestine in the future. Right? Connect your relations with your parents, with your masjid. And I like the point that Arshad always speaks about how we need to connect to our masajid. We need to connect our masajid to the Masjid al-Aqsa. Remember, when was Salah revealed to the Muslims?
When was?
Laylat Isra al Mi'raj.
Yes.
And after the Hijrah?
It was just before the Hijrah. The Mi'raj and
before.
the Salah happened
Yes.
in the year just before.
And that was the Salah was revealed on Muslims, became farz after Isra al Mi'raj.
Yeah.
And that also is a significant point for how Prophet Muhammad was taken from Mecca to Masjid al-Aqsa, right? And from there he went to meet Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? And that's where we were told to pray. And that connects Salah generally with Masjid al-Aqsa as well. Because Prophet Muhammad also he led with the Anbiya there in Masjid al-Aqsa. Am I correct?
Yeah.
So it also
And it was also the first Qibla.
exactly. So that's how we exactly. So that's how we connect our lives. Every salah we pray 5 times. How do we connect? Do we think about Masjid al-Aqsa when we pray? When we make salah, that actually there is connection. Do we connect our salah, our masajid then to Masjid al-Aqsa? When we go to any masjid here, how connected are we? How many times? Sometimes some masajid unfortunately don't even make dua for Masjid al-Aqsa. Many of them do. They make dua for Palestinians and for Masjid al-Aqsa. But some, unfortunately, I have been to some masajid, they don't make, they make dua for Muslims generally and whatever, which is good. But how many connect to Masjid al-Aqsa?
And this connects then to our names, how our message is connected to the upliftment of the society. And then from there, how are we connected to the schools, right? You see the point, how the schools, then universities, how much are we excelling there? And universities, how much are the universities producing Muslim minds that can lead the South African economy, the South African society, the South African politics, and become not just, we don't want to lead just because we want to dominate, it's because we want to serve. Because we know that Muslims should have the best ethical standards. And that's what should drive them. We need to follow our Islamic ethos. And we want to spread that. Not to, again, I want to say this because there might be some also like non-Muslims listening to us. I want to say that we are not saying this, and I speak about myself, and I'm honestly, we fight there in Palestine, not only for Masjid al-Aqsa because it's, you know, the first Qibla and all of that. That's a very important part, you know. Many people around the world, when they are driven, and there are many non-Muslims who support Palestine, we are driven by justice. You know, many times I say, you know what, if, say, for example, something happens and all the Zionists tomorrow decide that they want to become Muslims, right? Should we stop the struggle against injustice? No. Because our struggle is not against a particular religion, as you mentioned, Brother Ashad. It's not against a particular race. It's against injustice. And whoever is involved in oppressing us, we will fight them. We'll fight injustice wherever it is. Even, inshallah, and even the greater vision that sometimes I dream about also, doesn't only involve Palestine. You know how, and especially after the Arab Spring, sometimes I think, when we liberate Palestine, actually it will become easier to liberate, you know, other parts of the Middle East, and then slowly, you know, because many of these militaries that are oppressing our people also elsewhere, in Egypt, in Syria, wherever it is, that oppression is supported by the State of Israel.
Yeah.
Right.
And that helps keep Israel
surviving, basically.
Surviving, yeah.
So it's a whole vision about building a nation, building a whole ummah. We many times we speak about, we make dua about our ummah, but how are we connected to the ummah? How are we going to build this ummah? And like think about it, like everybody who is listening, just think about it with yourself. Like when we say what is the ummah, you know, what's the structures of this ummah? You know, it should be like an organization. Imagine organization. That's how it should be.
I think the problem with the organization is it starts at probably the guy working on the floor all the way up through to management. There's no clear guidance to, and you know, we spoke a few nights ago about a group of Muslims saying, no, we must make dua, we must make dua, we must make dua. And you mentioned the beautiful point. Had the people made dua in the time of Umar ibn al-Khattab, radiallahu anh, Palestine would not have been free. Had the people made dua in the time of Salahuddin al-Ayyubi, Palestine would have not been free. Dua is in its place. But equally important is action. Right? So we make dua.
Make dua if I want to go to work. I want not to take me safe to work, but I'm still got to get in the car.
Exactly. Otherwise, there's no bread on the table. Or Nablusi Kunafa. So an important thing is that we need to start mobilizing. And about that domination. What is leadership in Islam? Sayyidul Qawm, Khadimu. The master of a people, the leader of a people, is in service of that people. And unfortunately, Muslim leadership today is such that I'm the leader. We have adopted the European, Western ideology of what leadership is. I dictate, do this, go there, whatever. I'm not in service of. One day, and again, Umar ibn al-Khattab, he was cleaning the public toilets in Medina al-Munawwara. And the Sahaba came to them and said, you are Amir al-Mu'mineen. Why are you doing this? And again, the signature of what true leadership is that why is this beneath me to do? And we don't find that leadership. I just want to mention something about, but before I do that, there's a few comments that I need to mention, inshallah. Firstly,
And then we'll have the audience as well if they have any questions. Zahra Gabriels, excellent discussion, mashallah. Interesting discussion from Anisa Ali. Abu Ruqayya says, Allah bless young Umar and make him part of the victorious army. Abu Bakr Inko says, Umar is an example to all of us, alhamdulillah. What an amazing conversation, keep up the good work. And then, then we have the link to Muna's Instagram handle as well. Abdul Ghani says, Hafidhumullah bihifdihi. May Allah preserve you with His protection. So that is some of the comments that came through. Please send out any other further comments, inshallah, or questions that you might have for the panelists, inshallah. The point that I wanted to mention, and we're going to have a break soon, inshallah, and then is it all?
It's almost opposite 11.
It's almost opposite 11.
So no
Okay.
break.
It's almost time for the Hajj. A point that I wanted to highlight was you spoke about that first generation and the fact that they were so scared, so fearful. And it reminds me of the hadith narrated by Tawbah. And the hadith comes in the Sunnah of Abu Dawud as well as the Musnad of Imam Ahmad. Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam was sitting with the companions, and Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam says, you will find a time when the enemy of Islam, those people that stand against the truth, those people that stand against justice, will invite one another as how a person invites another to a meal. So when you walk into any house in Cape Town and it's lunchtime, supper time, whatever, the first thing that the mom in the house is Bismillah. You're inviting the person to the meal.
Come home.
Yeah, come home. Right? So Rasulullah says, you will find a time in this ummah where the enemies of justice and haqq and the enemies of Islam will invite one another as how a person is invited to a meal to have a piece of this Muslim, right? And the companions were sitting there and they thought to themselves, how can the Muslims be in such a condition? How can the Ummah be in such a poor condition? And Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam was then asked, will it be that it is on account of us being small in number? We are going to be little. Rasulullah says no. Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam says, you will be as much as that froth or that bubble. So if I can paint a picture, unfortunately, Joburg guys might not understand this because they don't have a beach. But if you go to a beach and the wave crashes, it creates that bubbles and that froth on top of the wave. So as the wave comes down and crashes, we have all of this foam on the top layer of the water. You will be as much as that, says Rasulullah. But on account of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala having removed the fear of yourselves from the hearts of the enemy, what the Zionist state of Israel managed to do was take that fear that they had for us out of their hearts and place it into ours. And then Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam says, it is also and Allah will replace your hearts or fill your hearts with al-wahan. And then Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam is asked, mal wahan? What is wahan? The companions asked Rasulullah, what is wahan? And Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam says, and for me, this was like, oh, these are two sifat, these are two characteristics or two distinguishing factors that we all need to work on, inshallah. حب الدنيا وكراهية الموت. On account of the love of this dunya and the dislike of death, we will find ourselves in that condition. If you look today, we look at small Omar, we look at Abdullah, we look at Muna, we look at Mahmoud, all of these people, Ahmed, for example, all of these people, they don't have this dunya. We live in this dunya, yes, and we use the aspects of this dunya. But at the end of the day, if we want true change, if we want true leadership, if we want a strong ummah, we should not love this dunya. and we should love meeting Allah. But it is on account of us, and I speak to myself first, right? The concept of death, and this guy next to me, subhanAllah, I asked him emphatically straight, are you scared to die? And he said, no, I'm not scared to die. Because he mentioned some interrogations where everything was leading to him probably being murdered and dumped in the middle of the desert, and his family doesn't know where he is. And he just, with conviction, yaqeen, and he said, I'm not scared to die. And if it needs to happen, it needs to happen. And I know I'm making things now probably very uncomfortable, but to have such conviction, and then Abdullah said, and I quote, many have died before me, and many will die after me, but we will never stop until Palestine is free. And if we start doing that, if the mindset starts changing to the dislike of this dunya, or no love for this dunya, but loving to meet Allah, then Palestine, the Uyghur Muslims in China, the Muslims in Sri Lanka, the Rohingya Muslims, all of these various persecutions of injustice and human rights violations, and all of these, it will become easy to overcome. Because look at our number of Muslims in the world today, what, 1.8 billion? How big is the state of Israel? How many people are there?
It's like the size of a neighborhood in some state.
Yeah, it's so small compared to us. But our Arab states are normalizing it.
Didn't we say the other day that even Cape Town is larger than?
Yeah, we were discussing the geographical size of Palestine. And we said, what, 6 hours from one side to the other?
Yeah, we said the Western Cape is bigger than the whole of
Than the whole of Palestine.
Yeah, and we said Cape Town is bigger than Gaza, for example.
Yeah. So why is it that we can't free Palestine? On account of diplomacy? On account of policies? On account of the UN General Assembly and their resolutions? Their resolutions has done nothing for us. Their resolutions has done nothing for the Palestinian people, but rather, in my opinion, it has perpetuated and allowed for Israel to continue in the persecution. It is basically, they took a can, and from 1948, they kicked it down the road till 1967. Then, when the Arabs stood up, the Palestinians stood up and said, this can't continue. They kicked it down further, and then 1988, the PLO comes about, or 1987, the PLO, and then they kicked the can down again, and they just continuously kick the can down the road, and in the process, more and more people, Palestinians, are being kicked out of their homes, settlements being created. And if you look at the Palestinian map, and this is a challenge for every one of our viewers, for those who have just tuned in, this is a 7 Shader program of the MJC's Youth Department. We're with Abdullah Rifat and Arshad Samodi. And we're just speaking about Palestine, and we're going to have the sisters and the Kunafa soon, inshallah. But we have 10 minutes left. A challenge for every viewer. Do yourself one favor out of everything. Do yourself one favor. Or not a favor. Take it on as an amana. Go and look at the Palestinian map. The map of Palestine before 1948. And then you see how systematically, piece by piece, Palestine shrunk, the apartheid state of Israel grew, and everyone just sat by idly, allowing for this to happen. Go and have a look at that map, inshallah. Arshad, you haven't spoken for a while, so I'll hand over to you, inshallah.
Even though it might look like a sad picture when you look at that map, asking us to look at that map now, but it doesn't make me any less, or doesn't make me hopeless or despair, not for a second, that the victory and that the liberation of Palestine and Masjid al-Aqsa and the land and the people is coming it's underway and it's coming very soon. Because as long as it's coming, it's soon. And maybe I want to mention a hadith for Umar and for all of the Ummah that's out there. Yeah? And that is a hadith, and it has more than one riwayah and more than one of those ahadith is by the Sahabi Abu Umama al-Bahili, when he says that Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam says that there will always be a group among this ummah. There will always be a group among this ummah that will be victorious on the truth, or they will stand on the truth and with the truth. Those that oppose them won't be able to vanquish them. Whether it is in terms of those that are on the other side, those who are supposed to stand with them, like we see those normalizing, those that are open enemy fighting them.
I mean, imagine more
They won't be
normalized.
able to harm them.
Sahih.
And then they ask, where are they? Where are they, O Rasulullah? And he said, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, fi Bayt al-Maqdis wa aknafi Bayt al-Maqdis. They are in the sacred city, Al-Quds, which is and has the most sacred site, which is Masjid al-Aqsa Mubarak, and around and the surrounds. And even Umar here in Cape Town is one of that little soldiers that is surrounding Bayt al-Maqdis. As Sheikh Ra'id Salah, who is now still in solitary confinement in one of the worst apartheid jails in the apartheid Israel, said, anyone who works for Palestine, and Umar was working for Palestine for the liberation when he cut that jersey, the Chelsea jersey, anyone, everywhere, whether you're in Cape Town, working for the liberation of Palestine, then you can be counted in that hadith. The Prophet says that you are surrounding Bayt al-Maqdis, you are firm, standing on the truth, and those who oppose you won't be able to harm you. So when we see whether we talk about the 1.8 billion, it's not going to take 1.8 billion to overcome this enemy. And even though they've taken so much land, even if, it doesn't mean that they're going to keep it forever. This is the sunnah of Allah Ta'ala. When if the ummah had gone through a period of weakness and we lost some land, we are rising. When we hear that story of Umar, we are on the way to victory. This is the generation that's that's leading us to victory. So we are on the way, firmly on the way. Now that we are looking for Laylatul Qadr, many times we only go sleep little and make tahajjud, make dua. I would say people need to, in these nights, go and support the youth group. Find the youth group in your area that you're going to make an intention. I'm going to support this youth group, whether it's now in these nights by giving some sadaqah to them, or after. That I'm going to support the youth that's going to bring honor to the ummah, change the conditions of the ummah.
And that is extremely important, right? Two things. One, the normalization. We don't want to speak about it because people don't want to put the possibility to the Haramain at risk, for example, right? So we know that, for example, what's this, Emirates, Dubai, right? So
UAE.
yeah, the UAE. So they had this normalization thing. And then I spoke to my wife one day, and I told her, look, I will never fly on Emirates again. As I will never buy K-Way again. And she said, but why? And then we spoke about it, and I explained to her my thought process, and I said, the fact that a Muslim state, an Islamic state, the UAE, who is predominantly Muslim, and you're supposed to be in support. Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam says the Muslim is a brother of the Muslim. You are the Palestinians' brother, but you are turning your back on the Palestinian and saying, no, I'm going to side with Israel. That's basically what normalization is. How can I support them? So my wife, so we were discussing, and I told her, this is my thought process, that yes, my ticket to Makkah or wherever I want to go and travel might be 11,000, 12,000 rand, or whatever the ticket price is. Maybe it's on a special for 6 grand. I will not give it to them. And yes, you can say, but to buy us millions of rands and whatever, they're not going to get mine.
So
Even if
every
it means
contribution, every contribution.
exactly, even if it means that I'm going to pay more on another airline, I will still refuse to fly Emirates, no matter how luxurious they might be or whatever. So we've got 5 minutes. No matter how luxurious they might be, that is the. How can it be that I support them when they are not supporting the Palestinians?
Yeah, this is a call that we will continue to make. It's
Yeah.
a call that anyone anyway
And-
can be part of.
Yeah.
By deciding, what milk to buy and what apple
Exactly.
to eat and what kunafa to buy. Kunafa will always be Palestinian.
Yeah.
Like the original sister will always
You
be
know-
Cape Town Muslim.
Yeah, Sheikh, I just wanted to mention 2 points.
Yeah.
One is like,
I was busy with my first point.
oh, you still, mashallah. Okay, go on, I'll go.
Yeah, so my point that I wanted to come to was how big an impact did the boycotting of South Africa have in ending apartheid?
Anyone will tell you a major.
Exactly. The Springboks were kicked out of competitions. They were not, and we all know South Africa and rugby was a big deal. Right? There's no one better than the Springboks. And the problem with that was no. The problem with that was now that the Springbok team is kicked out of being allowed to participate, suddenly it became a problem. And we can say, yes, but it's stupid, it's rugby. Rugby in apartheid South Africa, rugby in post-apartheid South Africa is a big deal in South Africa. So when they see here our glamour boys are kicked out of being allowed to compete, it was a blow to them. Then comes the financial sanctions on South Africa. Produce is not being bought from South Africa. Countries are boycotting South Africa. As a result of these economic pressures placed upon South Africa, it resulted in what? It automatically resulted in South Africa having to reconsider their position in relation to apartheid.
And no one
So-
can live on their own in this world.
You cannot live in it as an island.
And
So-
Israel is only surviving because of the support of the so-called democracies, the hypocrisies of the world, the hypocrisy of the US and the UAE.
Exactly.
Whether you call yourself whatever by whatever name, but if you are stabbing the Palestinians in your back.
Yeah.
Still waiting.
Yeah,
You can
so-
get the
so-
3 minutes left now.
Yeah. So the point was, we can make a difference.
Of course.
South African Muslims is something like 2% of the community, of the population of South Africa. But we generate something like 10 or 12% of the GDP. Just think about it. We are 2% of the community, of the population of South Africa, the Muslims in South Africa. But that is our contribution to the GDP. Imagine that contribution goes for Muslim businesses. And those Muslim, you're speaking about that vision, those Muslim businesses invest in other Muslim enterprises across the world. And more Muslim, again, not with domination, but to be in service of. And that is the difference between us and everyone else. I would like to end off, right? I would like for Arsha to speak about what Youth for Al-Quds is having now, this last few days of Ramadan. I would like for Abdullah to speak about whatever points he has.
More than 2 minutes.
Already 2 minutes.
You felt good the same. Like that girl when the jellyfish was washing, on the shore. And that little girl, ran, she was walking with her parents on the beach, and she picked up one jellyfish, and she, wanted to take it back to the water. And they said, but what, how you can't pick up all these jellyfish. You can't, how are you going to make a difference? What did she say? But I'm making a difference to that jellyfish.
Yeah.
So that's what we are telling the youth. If you by doing one little act, it's going to be you are changing your world, and you could change the world of Palestinian. You can change the world for a better place. Youth for Al-Quds needs, hundreds and thousands of youth all over South Africa to stand with it and to stand with movements and youth groups like it to make a change. We need to change ourselves here in South Africa so that we could help and change things in Palestine.
There are many points that I want to say, but as I said earlier, say that do go out in your community and support groups. You can support Youth for Al-Quds, you can support Mizan or Friends of Mizan, and you can support any other local group. Again, think of it not just from you can think it from many angles. Islam and we as humans, we shouldn't be pacifists.
And we shouldn't just sit by and wait for others to, to support us and help us. As you said, that the Muslims in South Africa, they can be a game changer and they can, play a major role in influencing everything. Look at in Cape Town, for example, and maybe this is a message to the Cape Townians who may be listening to us, is that there is a lot that you can do to help Palestine. And that starts, it starts from your homes. It's not about the people that you choose to represent you wherever they are, And I would say, the reason I'm saying this, some people might say, like, why are you as a Palestinian coming here, like you're supporting one group over the other? I would say it's because it does affect us. It affects me as a Palestinian. I'm sitting there back home, and I do think, how is South Africa? You mentioned earlier about the visas, right? How do we as Palestinians, get benefit? How is our relations with our South African brothers? And it has lots of impact. Next year, inshallah, Friends of Mizah is going to take a delegation from South Africa to Palestine. Judge Siraj Desai will be leading that delegation. And that cannot happen, if there isn't proper procedures also from South Africa, if they don't support figures like that. Like Judge Desai has been really supportive, and he's a strong supporter of Palestine. And that is one of the leaders, for example, because he's a well-known judge. He's been firm on supporting Palestinians. And we need leaders like that who have, that they, values are there. You know their values, you know where their votes are, you know what they stand for. And I would say that join people like Judge Desai, and I would say actually, and now I'll say, come to Palestine also, with people like that. People who can afford it and can, join the campaign, please do come to Palestine so you can connect literally with the Masjid al-Aqsa. You can connect with the soil of Palestine there, And this is, maybe I would leave this comment, maybe it's the last comment, is that when you visit Palestine, you send also a message to the Palestinians that our hearts are connected, that we come here to support you. There is, a psychological support, there is political support, and there is economic support as well. There's a social support in that. When you come and you practice with Munna al-Kurd and the brothers in Sheikh Jarrah neighborhood, when South Africans go and visit that home, do you know how much, they will feel that, if they are now fighting with 10 soldiers, they can fight against 100 soldiers. When you give them that energy, they already, mashallah, like they have enormous energy there. All Palestinians, I would say, you always see pictures coming. After every protest, you will see pictures of Palestinians fighting against these soldiers. No matter how heavily armed, no matter how many tanks they bring. You'll see like a small boy standing with a small stone like this, throwing it at the tank. We know it's not really going to affect the tank. This boy might go actually to jail for 10 years. The law in Israel, if you throw a stone at the tank, at an Israeli tank, you go to jail for 10 years. Yet they don't fear that tank. That the symbolism of it, that your military doesn't scare us. That's the point. That's the point that we want to tell them, that no matter how much you try to strike fear into our hearts, as a matter of fact, we turn that the other way around and we scare these soldiers who come there because they all spoiled, to be honest. They all spoiled in their homes, and they come there suddenly they want to fight against Palestinians who know that it's our right. And when a thief goes to steal somebody's land, when a thief goes to any shop to steal, they are scared. Right? The same thing with the Israelis. As much as they have weapons, but we are still stronger than them because our will, our hearts are stronger than them, and we will definitely defeat them in our lifetime. And I will end with that.
I mean, to end off two things. One, we're all going to come and sit down here on the three of us are going to sit here in the front. Camera's going to be brought nearer. We're going to do Kusistas and Kunafa. And then the debate will happen off air, inshallah. Inshallah.
So but we already know who's going to do it.
Yeah.
So
we will do the Kusistas
you can
and
speak
Kunafa.
well because you know that Kunafa will win. Don't worry.
Yeah. To end off from my side. And this is for all of our youth in Cape Town, all our major cities, Cape Town, Joburg, Durban, Pretoria, PE, across the whole of South Africa. Every single youth that is watching this, that is going to watch this over the next couple of weeks or whatever, One, in this last few days of Ramadan, make dua for the people of Palestine, make dua for every Muslim anywhere across the world that is being oppressed, whether it be by a Muslim oppressor or whether it be by a non-Muslim oppressor. Let us make dua for the Mathalumi, for those people who are being oppressed across the world, whether it be in Syria, whether it be in Sri Lanka, whether it be in the Rohingya, whether it be the Kashmir people, whether it be the Uyghur Muslims. Let us make dua for the Mathalumi, number one. And this is for the youth, right? This address is not for the elderly. Our young people need to internalize this. They need to proactively start doing things, right? And start with dua. Secondly, see what you can do as a young person, as a youth of this ummah. To end, I will leave you with one name, and that is a Sahabi by the name of Usama ibn Zayd. Usama ibn Zayd was a 18-year-old companion of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He was very loved by Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He was the son of Zayd, who was the adopted son of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And Usama ibn Zayd, on the deathbed of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, towards the end of the life of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, a jaysh needed to go up. A group of Sahaba, an army, needed to go out in defense of Islam. And when Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam needed to select the general for that army, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam chose Usama ibn Zayd. Usama ibn Zayd leaves Madinatul Munawwara with that army as the general. And as they are traveling, news reaches them that Rasulullah had passed away. Sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And Usama is stricken by grief because Habibullah has passed away. So now what do we do? Do we lose hope? Do we throw our hands up in the air and say, what do we do now? Or do we continue marching on? Some in the army wanted to turn back and return to Madinatul Munawwara. And we understand why. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam had passed away. Others said no. The mission must continue. The da'wah must continue. There are people in this world that is waiting for this kalima la ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Usama ibn Zayd continued marching. Young people of South Africa, wake up. We're living very luxurious lives that has made us soft. It has made us weak. Become like Usama ibn Zayd and continue marching, not just for yourselves, but for all of the generations of this ummah to come. Continue marching, inshallah. So we're going to have the Kusisis and the Kunafa now. Jazakumullah for everyone that tuned in, inshallah. For our people that came out, Cape Town is in for a storm this evening. We make dua that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala keeps everyone safe, inshallah, whether they're on the road going back home. We pray that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala keeps everyone that came out tonight for the program here at Islamia College Auditorium. We say Jazakumullah khairan to Islamia College for allowing us to broadcast from the auditorium, alhamdulillah. May Allah keep all of us safe on our way back home. And we pray that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grants us to be successful in this month of Ramadan. Ameen ya Rabbal Alameen. So let's have the Kusistas and the Kunafa, inshallah.